G'day all, welcome back to the G-Man Show. Today we're going to take a look at job hunting and why getting a job feels very difficult in 2025. So I'll give you my take and I'll bend this video around for the Australian audience and the Australian experience, because I know a lot of people out there at the moment are on the job hunt and are facing severe headwinds when it comes to being able to satisfy the requirements of a lot of jobs.
What American workers earned on average in 1972. Now in 2023, these same workers earn around $27.45 per hour.
Minimum wage on January 1st, it will go from $14.49 an hour to $15.74 an hour. That's an increase of $1.25.
These figures might give the impression that wages in America have risen significantly in recent years. However, when we take inflation into account, wages have remained practically identical over the last 50 years. With today's workers earning only 12 cents more than in 1972.
More workers are rejecting the federal minimum wage.
That's according to an article from the New York Times, which found the federal wage floor of $7.25 is becoming increasingly irrelevant.
But with inflation at its highest since 1981, Americans feel the impact of slow wage growth.
Petrol and housing costs in the US have also jumped dramatically in recent weeks, forcing millions of families to make tough choices.
Moreover, two-thirds of...
That's the thing I want to talk about when they say that wages are growing, especially for people who are probably on the average income or people that are working class and are on that minimum wage. The truth of the matter is, as said in this video, is that money, while adjusted for inflation, is very similar to what it was decades ago. The cost of everything else has far exceeded any growth to wages. So it puts people in a very tough position that as they keep on working for their careers, right, the idea is that you're going to have more stability, build up a nest egg, have a better quality of life the harder you work. But the numbers aren't lying here. Life is actually getting harder. People are working harder than ever. Wages aren't going to keep up and things are going to get more expensive. And it's very, very tough. I want to talk about the job market specifically in Australia. Okay, so you see on the news, you get Chalmers coming out, you get other finance people from the government coming out and saying, nothing to see here, everything's looking fine, unemployment is remaining steady, blah, 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 blah. Sure, I guess those numbers, however they calculate them, I would like to see how they actually do calculate them because I don't really trust them. Okay. So let's talk about employment. I know a lot of people in my network who are very good workers can't get a job to save their life. Now, there's a reason for this, is that because there's a lot of people that are being unemployed, businesses are also struggling to have the money to be able to employ people. So there are a lack of jobs being created, regardless of what anybody says. That saying that, when they do have budget to put somebody on, they put together a dream list of a job description which encapsulates the perfect employee. And not everybody knows everything. Some people have strengths in certain areas and weaknesses in some areas, especially if you go and look at any job description. You might tick half the boxes and know that you'll be able to do the other ones. But these businesses very much have the pick of the litter when it comes to candidates. And so they're going to take and they're going to scrutinise getting that perfect candidate at the moment because there are a lot of people applying for a lot of jobs. So I'll speak from experience here. I know somebody who works in HR at a large corporate. They put a job ad out for I guess you'd call it a normal sort of entry-level role. When I say entry-level, it doesn't require tertiary education or advanced qualifications or anything like that. Within a few days, they had thousands, not hundreds, not dozens, thousands of applications. And so what happens there is a lot of great candidates get passed over as well because they use artificial intelligence to filter them out, or they just can't read them all. And so they just take a bunch, they take a sample size and they work from that. Also out there, I know people that are in qualified professions who are being laid off. And it's not due to any sort of performance issues or anything like that. The economy is really struggling. And in certain areas of work is to say any sort of business that doesn't have long-term government contracts or anything like that struggles. Why? Because there are increased taxes. Interest rates are up, so the cost to operate their business using working capital, which most businesses borrow. They're not cash-funded businesses, they're debt-funded businesses. And business borrowing is very much struggling at the moment with a higher cash rate. And so now this, after the last few years of all of this, businesses who have been trying to hold on to people, absorbing losses, absorbing increased costs and reduced profit, they have no choice but to lay off staff. So a lot of layoffs happening out there. Now, this is the point that I was getting to by raising those points that I just made. They say that unemployment is low. Unemployment is low, the headline figure, because people are just taking any job they can to get some money in. Times are really tough out there for a lot of people. Now, some people are insulated from it and they have recession-proof jobs, maybe working as public servants, etc. But people out there who are working in businesses that rely on income to be able to maintain staff levels, very much in the firing line. And I've been even spoken to a friend this week, top guy, really high performer, adds a lot of value to business. He got sacked. And the only reason they said is, look, we can't afford you. That's basically it. And so, yeah, he does get a bit of a redundancy payout. But being made redundant is a horrible thing because you're going into a weak job market. So you might get a short-term sugar hit of a few weeks' pay or whatever it is, however long you've been there. But then you're faced with the uncertainty and lack of opportunities. And it's a very bad place to be at the moment. And a lot of people are dealing with that. A lot of people are living off any savings they might have had, borrowing money, doing what they can to keep the lights on, so to speak. But that time is running out for a lot of people. So people are going and doing all these unskilled jobs when they're overqualified, and then they get stuck doing those jobs because now they've got experience and time in on a job that's not relevant to their profession, and it makes it very hard to get back out of that and into the job that you were doing previously at a pay that you were getting previously.
Of American workers claimed that inflation outpaced any salary increases in the last year. So why aren't American workers paid enough, and what can be done about it? Wages in the United States have stagnated since the early 1970s, but it was in 1979 when the gap between workers' productivity and their wages began to substantially increase. Between 1979 and 2023, workers' wages grew by 17.5%, while productivity grew more than 3 times faster, at 61.8%. In other words, today's workers are 61.8% more efficient than workers 50 years ago, yet they earn only a few cents more than back then.
People in Kentucky are struggling to make ends meet, and it has nothing to do with their employment status.
Wage stagnation is worse for low and middle income workers, as the bottom 90% of American workers saw their annual wages increase by only 28.2% from 1979 to 2023.
That's really a really staggering figure, and I'm sure it probably wouldn't be much different here at home, all right, here in Australia. Think about this: if you're somebody who doesn't have opportunities to grow your wage, not everybody can be an entrepreneur. Not everybody has the ability to go and study and do well at university and go and get really good jobs and all that sort of stuff. All the circumstances to be able to do that. Some people can't go with low income to go and study and do all those things, and they're sort of trapped in jobs that they'd probably rather not be doing, and they're probably far capable of doing more. So there's a lot of different reasons why people get pegged into these lower income jobs. But think about this. Everything else is just going through the roof. So I can be absolutely empathetic to this. All of my costs have increased. All of your costs have increased at home. Think about the supermarket. Every time you go to Woolworths or Coles, everything's gone up. They'll have a sale. The thing will be half price. Then when it's off sale, they bump up the price a little bit and say it's the new low price. Utilities, through the roof. Your water, your gas, your electricity, things you need to live. So people go without using heating. They restrict their water use. Like just the quality of life just goes through the floor People are doing whatever they can to survive. Like, think times are bad. Times are bad. I know a guy who, over the course of his career, did really well, had a really good job, was able to, purchase a home with a huge mortgage. Then interest rates went up through the roof. Yep, sure, people can say it's his fault. He overborrowed and all that sort of thing. No one really saw the quantum of those sorts of increases coming. Everybody knew things were going to increase, but not, 13 times over such a short period of time. Anyway, he's found himself now redundant. His wife was made redundant and she's pregnant. So things can be going really well for you and turn very, very quickly. It's tough out there.
While the top 1% saw a 179.3% increase in wages. Meanwhile, the top 0.1% experienced a staggering 389.1% growth. This means that the gap between the rich and the poor has widened over the last 50 years.
Growing gap between rich and poor Americans is one of the biggest challenges facing the country. Get this, the richest 1% controls more wealth now than at any time in more than a half century.
Real wages, adjusted for inflation, haven't changed much since the late 1970s. However, inequality increased during most of this period. In 2019, during the disruption in the U.S. labor market caused by the pandemic, there were surprising wage increases in various industries. In fact, there was a significant acceleration in wage growth of around 16%, especially for low-wage workers. This was due to a labor market shortage caused by excessive demand in the United States, immigration restrictions, early retirements, and, of course, illnesses or fatalities.
There is a shortage of skilled tradespeople throughout the U.S. economy, a persistent problem that started well before the pandemic.
Automation is another explanation for wage stagnation in the United States. The McKinsey...
That's the thing. So people are really cheering on automation, the advent of technology, etc. I think for business owners, it's great because you invest in these technologies, you have that capital outlay, but then you reduce your ongoing operational costs significantly. You've got people cheering them on. I've made some videos about this recently, about AI and all that stuff, and people calling me a boomer and I'm screaming at clouds and all this sort of shit. But it really does have a negative impact on society. Why? Because not as many people are needed to do their jobs anymore. What happens? People think that they're not going to be impacted by it. So you have a weak economy here in Australia. You have a lot of automation coming in. What do you think happens? Heads get cut. People end up on benefits. People end up losing houses. People end up burning through whatever safety net they might have if they've been good enough to save one. Put in really stressful times. And that's the thing I want to talk about as well in Australia. Like a lot of people haven't been around long enough, and I'll say myself included, during their working history to see a real downturn. Because ever since I've been working the last 20 years or so, yes, we had the GFC and stuff like that, but we here in Australia mostly got out of that unscathed. But things are really bad now. The chickens are coming home to roost, so to speak, due to all the things that have been happening over the last 5 years. It's really starting to flow through. I've noticed it. I work as a contractor. I won't say exactly what I do, not to dox myself, but I work as a contractor, work's dried up. A lot of people in my profession, jobless, redundant. That's not due to automation. That's due to no business, lack of people spending. The economy is bad. So they want to go and talk about the economy's fine. I think I watched a video recently that said unemployment's at 4%. Okay. I don't really truly believe that number. I'd love to see the numbers that go behind that because a lot of people are struggling. And as I said, a really good friend of mine who's, as you would say, done all the right things apart from probably overborrowing on a mortgage. But I mean, really, is it overborrowing or is it just the cost to entry? And now he's found himself without an income. His wife doesn't have an income, kid on the way, no real options, no real optimism, going into a depression because he feels helpless. He can't provide for his family. And these are things that are happening to a lot of people. I don't want to be a bit of a doomer in this video, but I'm just telling you how it is out there. Then we talk about The government says the economy is going well. Things are going fine. We've had mild growth. The only reason why you've had mild growth is because you've imported it. Why do you think that there is so much immigration? It's to pump up GDP. Importing GDP. That's it. Otherwise, we would be in a recession. Things would be horrible. Things are bad. So you've got a lot of gig and economy workers coming over. That's fine. Those jobs need to be done by people. Things are just cooked.
The Global Institute predicts that 45.3 million workers will lose their jobs due to technological advances by 2030. Automation has been a significant factor so far, especially in manufacturing jobs. For example, in the past, cars were built using machines, but there was a lot of hands-on work. Now, much of that is done with machines, and workers need many more skills to operate them, resulting in the disappearance or underpayment of many routine jobs, as wages in such jobs have decreased by about 12% in recent years.
There's no question artificial intelligence will remake the workplace. Recent analysis from investment firm Goldman Sachs looked at the global impact and found AI could replace 300 million full-time jobs, including positions in the legal and engineering fields.
Over the next 2 or 3 decades, many economists believe there will be significant disruption in the labor market due to new automation. Even workers with university education, such as financial assistants and accountants, and even some diagnostic medical roles, will be performed by machines with artificial intelligence, posing...
It'll be more widespread than that. I'd really caution people who are going to university to really rethink what they're going to try and study and try and future-proof themselves. Even in the legal professions, I have friends who are lawyers, in-house lawyers, or even they work for those large firms. They have automation going on there, guys, that put together documents that only need to be edited by the lawyers. So the people that be doing all the grunt work, working late nights, burning the midnight oil, killing themselves to get these documents and contracts done, they're not going to be needed as much. They're going to have to reduce the headcount. They've already started to do it. It is quite a interesting time we're going to be in. It's going to be interesting to see what happens here. So you're going to have, yes, jobs are going to be created, but a lot of traditional jobs are going to be axed.
Competition for many Americans. Globalization is another reason for wage stagnation, forcing domestic workers to compete against unfair competition, where workers in many countries are paid much less.
BBC investigation found evidence that workers were being exploited. Women at the factory, which makes home textiles for the brands, said that they were forced to work excessive hours and weren't even allowed toilet breaks. The BBC also heard claims of poor working conditions from staff at an Indian supplier to Ralph Lauren.
Economists suggest that labor market dynamics played a more significant role than expected. About 35% of American workers today change jobs less frequently than before, although job changes lead to strong net wage growth. While about 43% of Americans do not change jobs for the sake of stability, the other 22% cannot do so because there is nowhere else to go. In many...
That is the thing that's happening at the moment. People are staying put in jobs. They're just trying to hold on to them because they can see what's going on out there. I'm going to talk about in Victoria. Victoria is cooked. There's not a lot of optimism here. Business is slowing down. We have increased taxes that are constraining business. We have huge government spending. I'll talk about the taxes again. You got extortionate levels of land tax that are put onto business operators who may own the property, who might own that premises that they operate out of. And there was a story recently where a guy, and I think he was paying $20,000 a year, which sounds a lot to me anyway, and it's gone up to like 200 grand. So how do they offset that charge? They either shut down, think, nah, it's too hard, I'll go work for someone else. There we go, more people in the workforce looking for jobs, unemployed people, or they sack people. So it's as I said, people that really haven't seen it. I know this happened here in the early 90s and late 80s, but a lot of people have been working. We've had good times. It's been green shoots for most industries. Most people have had a good amount of opportunity. And then we had the pandemic, which we got through somehow. obviously somehow being extravagant amount of taxpayer funded spending to keep things going, which we're all paying for now. As guys, I'm not trying to be a doomer. I know it's a public holiday today. I'm just telling it how it is.
Local markets, companies use the lack of competition to suppress the wages of their workers. About 60% of U.S. labor markets are considered highly concentrated, meaning a few employers compete for local workers. Just 10% more workers in an area can lead to a 1% reduction in wages.
In a booming market like ours, just about every industry is looking for high-skill employees who can get into a career quickly right now.
Companies can also play a direct role in stifling competition with methods like non-compete agreements. Approximately half of private sector companies in the United States that responded to the EPI survey said at least some of their employees are subject to non-compete agreements, meaning around 36 to 60 million private sector workers in America are subject to these agreements. Similarly, unions...
So just so you know what that is, guys, that is you have to have an extended duration between jobs. You just can't quickly go and get another job and take all your knowledge there. I don't know how long it is. It's probably different for all different kinds of employment. If it can be months. That's how... This makes it even harder for people to move around.
Unions that originally fought for higher compensation have drastically lost their power over the years. Union membership in the U.S. dropped from 20% of American workers in 1983 to only 10.3% in 2023. Workers in unions usually earn higher wages, around 10.2% more compared to similar non-unionized workers, thanks to methods like collective bargaining.
It is expensive to live here in California, and a new statewide campaign launched today hopes to help with affordability. It's called Living Wage for All. At issue is California's $15.50 minimum wage. The campaign is pushing for that to go higher.
Legislation could help address
similar things happening here. I know people who work in supermarkets or have worked in supermarkets, and they have the enterprise bargaining agreement there, which is not very favourable to employees. But people are forced to sign it, essentially, because so they can have a job. Let's talk a bit more about what happens in those places, even the big supermarkets. So they're raising all their prices. Yes, I understand they're a business and things are getting expensive and all their costs are going up and all that sort of stuff. What are they doing to offset that? They're having less workers work in their stores and expected to work very hard. They have monitors on them which calculate how long they're being productive for, and they have to have a certain threshold or KPI, otherwise they get sacked. So people are being worked to the bone. So you got less people working hard for less. Absolutely dystopian.
Some of the major issues causing wage stagnation in the United States. However, there is a limit to what can be done through policy when there are significant changes in technology and globalization. But policy can address other aspects, such as non-compete agreements, as these contribute to wage stagnation, as they are often applied to low-skilled jobs. On the other hand, the increase in remote work could also be beneficial for wage growth in local markets, as some employers prefer their employees to work remotely. In a way, remote work reduces the monopoly power of U.S. companies, as talented workers could work for any company worldwide remotely, earning a higher salary.
Before COVID, only 23% of professionals worked remotely. Today, 59% are working remotely most or all of the time, as according to data from the Pew Research Center.
Achieving a fair wage for all Americans is vital to ensuring the success of the U.S. economy.
I've heard of this happening as well, right? So yeah, I know a lot of people who work remotely, and now you have companies putting people off and saying, oh, you weren't as visible, or you weren't in the office as much, or whatever it may have been. When beforehand, they were never told that they needed to be there. It was fine to be working remotely. So you have companies twisting this now to say, well, you didn't put in, you didn't come in, you didn't give us 150%, you didn't do the commute, you didn't sit in the office and be seen. So that's why you're on the chopping block. Interesting times we're living in. I won't even get onto the whole work from home thing. I think most people are a lot more productive at home and happier, which then leads to increased productivity. But a lot of businesses like to exert control, even after being proven they can be highly profitable, getting record profits during all those shutdowns and lockdowns where everybody was forced to work remote, to say people now have to come back in or they won't have a job. And it's a good way for them to sack people. Sack people who have gotten used to living that lifestyle, have built their lifestyle around working remotely, with children and drop-offs and all this sort of stuff. So if those people resist, they get made redundant. Incredible.
Similarly, fair wages promote innovation and make the economy productive. Therefore, wages truly reflect the productivity and skills of American workers. So, if wages stagnate for a lot of people, it could be an indicator that productivity in the country is falling, which could affect the economy and all Americans in the future.
All right, I'm going to say this, right? I think where things are probably going to get a bit worse before they get better. I hate to say it, but that's my gut feeling. And I get impacted by that too. I'm not here sitting in an ivory tower saying all these doomer type things. It affects every single one of us. And now we're paying. We're paying for mistakes and missteps of government who have now constrained business investment and expansion. I know a number of businesses that were growing very, very well the last couple of years. And now due to all the increases in taxes and all the increase in all the interest rates, they've got to cut heads because they grew too quickly. Things are going well, and all of a sudden they weren't.
Near 11.2 million, that was the number of unemployed Americans in 2023. Incredibly, this figure is the lowest in 54 years.
Unemployment rate fell to its lowest since 1969. 517,000 jobs were added to the U.S. economy last month. That's almost double the number of jobs added the month prior.
With an unemployment rate of 3.4% in the United States, it seems the economy is recovering. Indeed, on paper, the job market now is robust, as the employment report from January also showed that the labor market of 2024 had started on a solid note.
The state of our union's labor market is strong. In fact, data released by the Labor Department Wednesday shows there are almost 2 job openings for every person who has quit or been laid off.
Concrete data suggests that the job market has been quite solid and indeed surprisingly resilient, especially after 2023, where there were mass layoffs.
As I said, I'm really skeptical about all these numbers. It's almost like nothing to say here, guys. Everything's going well when the anecdotal evidence says different. Unemployment also doesn't factor for underemployment. So people may be working reduced hours, working in jobs, as I said, they don't want to do, jobs that are far below their qualifications, on part-time or casual basis. Does not account for that. I'd love to see the true numbers.
And recession forecasts.
Layoffs in technology just keep coming. The latest, Google cutting hundreds of jobs.
Massive layoffs today, cutting the jobs of at least 115 employees. It's the largest workforce reduction in the paper's 142-year history.
Despite economists talking about how well the economy is doing, 12% of ordinary Americans feel that it is very difficult to find a job today. So, why does getting a job feel impossible now? And is the American labor market as strong as it seems? On average, full-time unemployed workers applied for an average of 30 jobs, only to receive an average of 4 responses or calls. In a survey conducted by the Pew Research Center, 55% of unemployed adults said they were burned out from looking for a new job. But the younger generations were the most affected, with 66% complaining of burnout from job searching.
Well, one man's quest to find a job is raising questions about the labor shortage right now. He says he applied to more than 60 entry-level positions. Entry-level. But he got one interview, and he's not the only one.
According to a quarter of Americans, job searching is a long and tedious process, as a study showed that applying to a job through a job board only has a 3% chance of getting hired. And
this then once again feeds into a lot of mental health issues that are going on for a lot of people at the moment. Obviously, I spoke about that friend of mine who is doing it really tough. He's applying for a lot of jobs, even jobs that he's probably overqualified for. He's getting no responses, nothing. He keeps getting rejection after rejection. They said 25% of people find that job hunting is tedious. I can't see how 100% of people wouldn't say that. It's the worst thing ever, looking for jobs. It's worse than trying to do online dating. And that's just as bad. It's worse. Times we're living in.
Americans have to search for many different jobs to increase their chances of being hired. Experts say this is due to the growing use of technology and job platforms, as many more people apply for the same job, and companies cannot read all the applications. Another significant factor is that there has been an increase in the average time it takes a company to hire an employee, reaching a record high of 44 days in the first quarter of 2023, with some industries like the energy and defense sector taking more than 67 days to hire a person. With some companies conducting up to 5 interviews with multiple rounds and assessments, Americans feel that getting a job today feels almost impossible. And they're right.
There is another side to this ongoing labor shortage that may surprise you here. Millions of qualified workers hitting the streets every day searching for jobs, but getting rejected.
While there are millions and millions of jobs available, there are millions and millions of Americans who are applying for those jobs but getting rejection after rejection.
Data have shown that the use of excessive interviews and assessments to gauge workers' knowledge is ineffective, as about 40% of workers who applied for a job in the fourth quarter of 2023 ensure that in their interviews they are not asked about concrete things related to their area of work. Similarly, 27% of employers claim that it is not possible to determine how good or not a candidate is from the first interviews, or
I think anything more than 3 is absolutely taking the piss. Even 2, how do you not have a feel for someone after the second interview? Yeah, you need to cull people, but 5? I went through one with 5 once, and I was lucky enough to get the job, but 5 interviews with just different people interrogating me. Very, very nerve-wracking, and you just think to yourself, it's putting a bad taste in my mouth from the offset. Anyway, guys, I'll probably leave it there. I don't want to drag this one on too long. So if you've enjoyed this one, let me know, and I'll see you in the next video. And for all you people struggling out there that are jobless, hang in there. Hang in there. That's all I can say to you. Times are tough, and I do definitely feel for a lot of people who are facing a lot of challenges that don't feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel for. Thanks.